Hello, I am Interweb Studios and today we will hear some malicious compliance with HOA stories. The first story was so good that someone commented that's the best petty bullshit I've seen posted here in a while. Cheers! If you want to help me against the YouTube algorithm, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment your thoughts. And with that, sit back and enjoy. I lived in this town surrounded by magnificent vistas. There was a small development on the outskirts for upscale homes and mansions. Below the development were a few older homes. Many celebrities and business owners had vacation properties in the area, multi-million-dollar houses they used maybe 1 month out of the year. Real estate had always been at a premium. There was one older home amongst all these giant view lots. A new buyer was a guy who owned a slew of RV dealerships and had obscene amounts of money, so he bought the most prominent lot on the top of the hill as you entered the development of maybe 20 lots. His project was a massive stucco structure with a multi-car garage and a much bigger RV storage space with a huge roll-up garage door. Think of the biggest RVs you've seen, and he had a garage built for it with an automatic door. The house was a nondescript sand color with a red tiled roof, and the entire lot was tastefully landscaped with different kinds of rocks, small mounds here and there, and a few shrubs to be low maintenance. The back of the property was fenced in with an 8-foot or higher block wall. The fence itself probably cost $100,000. His neighbor was a schoolteacher who had lived there before the development started and had a modest house. He decided to take advantage of the skyrocketing land prices in the neighborhood and sell, except no one wanted his shitty house when there were much larger empty lots available. He decided the real issue was that the new behemoth blocked his view, and that's why no one wanted to buy his 3-bedroom ranch house at mansion prices. It was really that his home didn't appeal to the market. So he became the president of the HOA, which included the older homes and the new development. And then the harassment started. The HOA had formed after the RV mansion construction had begun, but the home was so big, it took almost a year to finish. The HOA had passed a design theme rule that all houses must be painted in a specific color palette, with the predominant color being a taupe that was darker than this man's standard beige stucco color house. The palette included the taupe and a selection of trim colors in pink, teal, or tan. It was intended to give the community a Santa Fe look and feel, which just happened to be the colors of the president's shitty house. The RV owner took the HOA to court and the trial dragged on for a year. The guy never used the property, claiming it was still under construction during this time. He lost in court and had to repaint his property using only the design theme approved colors. So the guy brought out his contractor and had him repaint the entire property the Pepto-Bismol pink trim color. Everything was painted this color: the house, the fence, the trim, and the rocks in the yard. Then he had the massive driveway to the garage done in the same pink stamped concrete. Even the garage doors were pink. He locked up the house and never stayed there. The HOA was in an uproar because this house could be seen at the top of the hill for miles. None of the other lot owners broke ground. The president's home didn't sell for 2 years.
How on earth did mansion owner get roped into an HOA that didn't exist until after he owned the lot? One explanation: it was likely deeded as a HOA-controlled property, but because it was still under development, it was still under the full control of the developer, and therefore the association essentially only existed on paper. Once a certain percentage of properties were developed, the developer transferred control of the association to the homeowners, as required by law, and it fully came into existence. Reminds me of the story about George Lucas's movie studio. He bought land to build a huge movie studio to shoot some of his later movies, 2010s I think. But the studio was in a housing area, and the people with multi-million-dollar houses thought the new studio would bring riff-raff in and ruin the neighborhood. So Lucas said, "Fine, have it your way," and built a medium-rent housing development instead. So not only did the people have noise, but their house values plummeted. Lol.
I'm piggybacking off of the HOA trend going around here. This story was relayed to me by one of my favorite professors over 5 years ago, so my apologies if the details are foggy or inaccurate. My professor was a very, very private person, the sort of guy who would hesitate to tell you his favorite color if you hadn't known him long enough. He had recently had an incredibly nosy couple move in next door and realized the flimsy 4-foot fence he had got for the dog wouldn't keep out peeping eyes. So he installed a fence. But instead of using a standard size, which he knew his neighbors would peer over, he built an 8-foot fence. It wasn't even a week before HOA was on his ass, threatening every fine they could and claiming he couldn't have a fence over 6 feet tall. So, being a dutiful citizen, he called the fence company to uninstall said fence. While the fence was being taken down, he closely examined the HOA handbook on the precise definition of a fence. He installed a new 6-foot fence that fit every single regulation, but with a 3-foot brick wall beneath it. Down in the comments.
This reminds me of a guy that first worked as construction worker in his new house for many years ago. He wanted a huge concrete wall next to his driveway. I'm talking about the entire length of his land, huge. City planning didn't allow it. Not a chance that he was permitted to put something so large on the border of his land. He was a well-off dude and he let his lawyers loose on the matter. He really wanted that wall. A month later, his wall was there with a mailbox fixed to it. All within the city planning law. It turns out that city planning stated that he could build a mailbox on a fixed structure. They never gave precise size requirements for the fixed structure. I know a woman who had beachfront property and wanted to build a house but was refused by the city. She found out trailer park owners could have a caretaker cottage house and there were no restrictions. Built a 3-story house and the trailers still were beachfront as well. There is a similar story about Jim Barksdale, co-founder of Netscape. He wanted to build a fence but the city said it was too big, so he built a hill with a smaller fence on top of it. In my city, that's how builders are getting around building height limitations. They want to get 3 stories in an area that only allows 2 above ground stories, so they're building a hill, building 2 stories on top of it, then having a mostly exposed basement that is only partially covered by the hill.
This story is something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to was a commercial apartment condo place with an HOA. To paint the picture, this place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that lead to a parking lot. Some of which my mother noticed has fences. My mother handled mostly all of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quick that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent in a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guild lines, she finds a contractor, which she discovered was an old childhood friend, surprise, and has the fence put in. Cue HOA. My mom submits the contractor's document stating the kind of fence and color and specs, only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning: the technical term for the color white of the fence doesn't match what they allow. Best example would be they allow paper white, but it was labeled eggshell. They stated they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get the other white you had use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved to say the least. She went as far to take pictures of all the fences hers included and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't but still didn't care, the paperwork didn't match. Thankfully she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence and the HOA watch as it's taken away in a day. The next day the same fence comes back and gets put in again, this time the paperwork says paper white. It's been years and my mother still has the same fence, the HOA never said anything farther. Those fees were never paid, but it's fine, my mom doesn't use the pool anyway. Down in the comments.
Shoulda just told the WA the original paperwork had a mistake, and said it was paper white. I wouldn't have gone through the hassle of removing the fence and replacing it. Hire a painter to use a spray gun to paint the fence with a coat of water. Add a tiny bit of milk to the water so that it's milky and looks white to the casual observer. Submit paperwork to the HOA showing that the fence has been painted paper white.
I used to live in a suburban neighborhood. The houses cost a tiny bit more than the next neighborhood, so the people on the board, neighborhood volunteers, thought they were better than everybody. They did things like adding a gate, which nobody wanted, to keep out the non-existent burglars. If you wanted to plant anything in your yard, you needed approval. Write it up, submit it, wait for the stamp. They could make you tear your landscaping out if you didn't. One resident didn't like this, and submitted a form with all the plants they requested to cultivate. It was a long list of the specific names, the Latin names of a bunch of weeds and invasive species. It was approved. Down in the comments.
A gate, which nobody wanted, to keep out the non-existent burglars. Lol. We have one of those. Guess what? The gate won't stop any burglars parked on the surrounding streets and walking into the neighborhoods through the woods. It also won't stop any of the neighbors' grown-ass meth-head kids from breaking into your house. Grandma and Mom bought an HOA house in an arid state and were horrified at the requirement to keep up a green lawn. They put in a request, by mail, to change the lawn to xeriscape, think native, low to no water, low maintenance required, and waited for a response. No response was ever received, or made, so they ripped out the short grass and gave it the "I'm living in a desert" treatment. The HOA complained, but their own rules allowed it.
And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for sticking around, and since you made it this far, you will like, subscribe and check out these other videos you may like. Until next time. Toodles.